Welcome back, everyone, to the TRON podcast. This is your host, Rashad Woods. Today, I have a very special guest who served his country, is now an entrepreneur, helps veterans, author, a speaker, leadership council, wonderful individual all overall, former Commander Master Sergeant in the Air Force, 30 years, Mr. David Nordel. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you.
What's up, Rashad?
Yeah, it's good. Good to have you. And you have a fascinating background, first of all. And like I said, I always say this to everybody. I always like to tell your story. It's not my job.
Yeah,
How does a 19-year-old from a farming community decide that they want to join the Air Force? How did that?
It started way before 19. Listen,
Okay.
I had some, and I've been speaking a little bit informally about this because, we're getting ready nationally. We're going to go through a transition. It's going to happen. I don't care what side you are on politics. I don't care. What's going on right now is going to be change. And some people are going to hate it. Some people are going to love it. Some people that hate it will love it. Some people that loved it will hate it. It's all good. But one of the things that excites me is that there's a little bit of a different conversation happening. I was always geared to serve. And, ironically, from that little town that I came from, there's a guy that was a year behind me in high school that actually lives in Billings now with me. And he's a professor. And we got to sit down and talk. And I said, Kurt, how did we end up being who we are and leading the way we lead and serving people and those type of things? And he said, Dave, because from the time we were born until we went out into the world, it was never about us. The cows, the animals were always ate first. You always fed the animals, then you fed yourself, right? So I was surrounded, though, early on by some tremendous World War II veterans. I had an uncle, and I had two teachers that were really influential, right down to when we said the Pledge of Allegiance, we just didn't say it and sit down. He would pick that apart and talk about what that meant and those type of things. So I wanted to serve. And so even younger than that, all I wanted to do, Rashad, was I want to go in the Navy. I want to be a plumber. That was it.
Yeah, I saw that I saw that, right? And then
that's all I wanted. And this is all about attitude, right?
Yeah.
The day that all the recruiters were at the high school and I was standing there and I went up to the Navy recruiter and he's in that cool uniform that I love so much. I used to get up in the middle of the night and watch World War II Navy movies. Yeah. And the guy was absolute not good. Maybe he was having a bad day. I have no idea. But whatever, he didn't have the time for me. And a guy named Master Sergeant John Dees from the United States Air Force put his arm around me. He said, I might have an opportunity for you. And those guys compete no matter what. Yeah. And the next thing you know, I'm off to the Air Force telling them I want to be a plumber. They both have plumbers. And the Air Force said, no, you're going to go into medicine, which was the exact right thing. They knew better what I needed to be doing. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just wanted to put the uniform on. I wanted to serve. I didn't know if I was going to do 4 years or 40. And, once you get in it and you're in it to win it, then you start to serve and you put your head down and goes,
that's
looking back, I wouldn't trade any of it. The farm lessons and a lot of things that I lived, like the first book talks about, directly correlate to leading people all the way through combat and all that. So, yeah.
Well, it's crazy because I saw, one of your interviews. You're like, I lived on every single continent except Alaska, which for obvious reasons, Alaska's not happening to,
Antarctica, right, yeah.
Excuse me, Antarctica, like dummy, right? Yeah, Antarctica. Yeah. Sorry.
No,
apologize to all the Alaskans who listen.
Yeah, you're not a continent. That's okay.
Yeah, right. So what was fascinating? So your perspective on serving and seeing the world was shaped, by every place that you went. What was it like traveling the world as a young man, and even later on as you grew older? And the experiences that you saw in the places that you were in.
So let me give you some context. The Lord Jesus Christ probably gave me some tools that I didn't know I had. And when you come out of what I call a brown community, I grew up with migrant workers and the Portuguese community that I grew up in. You leave that community with a lot of ignorance. There's a lot you don't know. There's a lot you don't know. And when you go into an institution like the United States military, it is melted. It is uber melted. I struggled with that, man. My family sent me out the door with language, vernacular, things that I thought were absolutely hilarious. Jokes. I had jokes. No.
Yeah.
No, these are not jokes that you tell in a barracks. Because maybe half the barracks might think they're funny. The other half of the barracks might want to have a different type of conversation.
I can only imagine.
And so you gotta and so I hit all those tripwires, brother. I hit them all. And my inherent nature, probably because of medicine drives that. My inherent nature is, I like people, I respect people, but I didn't realize the kind of the, I got set up by my closed bubble, the society I was living in, no matter how
Right, right,
wonderful
right.
it did. And so when I got out there and I was kicking it around in the world, I was uncomfortable all the time. You're
I can
uncomfortable
only
in the Middle
imagine.
East. You're uncomfortable in Asia. You're uncomfortable in rooms with people that you serve with because you're not the same color. You're not the same gender. You didn't come from Rhode Island. Whatever the hell it is.
I hate to interrupt. I can only imagine even the same food, right? Like even
Oh,
like something simple as
dude, I thought grits were cream of wheat the first time I put a mouthful of grits. I'm telling you, bro, and I love grits now. I love grits. But I got some grits. I put some sugar
right,
on there,
right.
and I'm like, what in the hell is this? And the guy next to me is like, dude, those are grits, man. You need to be putting butter and salt and pepper.
Right.
So yes, so absolutely, and at my own expense, somebody gets a big laugh out of it, and vice versa, right? So it's yeah.
100%. 100%.
So I love it, yeah, and so that makes you really uncomfortable.
For sure. For
And
sure.
Rashad, this is societal, man. This is just leadership stuff. You have a choice to make from the time that you walk out into the world. And I'm talking about the time that you go on, join your first little league team, or you're in a whatever club or whatever you're doing, and you get mixed and matched. So, my boys were raised military brats, and they have so many blind spots in a great way. They just
Right.
navigate, man. You throw them in a room, and they got 10 friends in 10 minutes, and people are like, how did you know that guy? Well, I don't. I know how to do this.
Right.
Well, we all don't know how to do that. So I got out there, and for some reason, like I said, a God-given inherent thing, I just told myself, if I'm not making myself uncomfortable and asking hard questions,
Right.
scary questions, not
Right.
asking questions like, what the hell are grits? Where did they come from? Collard greens, man. Collard greens. And I was just telling somebody the other day, they were going to South Carolina. I said, okay. I said, here's the barbecue place, mac and cheese, collard greens. If you don't eat those, you suck. And they're like, what? And I'm like, hey, listen, I didn't know
Right.
any of that. I didn't know that whole thing, but I do now. So food is a great equalizer, right?
Well, that's what I said. What
So
a great end that is to somebody, though. Right? Like, if you
it's,
can't, like, the idea that you could actually, even if you don't love it, if you can just talk about it, have an experience with it. Obviously, my comparison pales to yours. But when you have a commonality with food, conversation and opening up can start to take place and bridge differences between people, which is a great lifestyle from leadership.
but think about how you grow. Because as a leader, you're going to get all different sizes, shapes, everything.
Yes,
You've got to take all of that on.
100%.
And if you early on are making yourself uncomfortable, these conversations, like I'll tell you, my first thing that I really had to get over was urban life. Had no understanding of it. You know how
Right,
that shapes, right? Where I came from, I wasn't a minority, so I didn't
right,
know what that felt like.
right,
So I had to get a perspective on that. Well, roll the clock forward, and now I've got 10,500, however many people I'm leading,
right.
and they're from all different walks of life.
Yeah,
And somebody walks into my office and they say, I have this issue, and the issue may be based off their cultural imbalance of where they're at, their environment.
for sure, for sure.
If I hadn't done the work ahead of time, I couldn't have built any level of empathy that gave me the ability to find the resources that they need. And sometimes you can't be the resource, but you better have a
Right,
network. You better have a network, and you better have built a foundation where you
right.
can say, I'm not your guy, but this gal is your gal. And I did a lot of that. And so I'm so thankful of being able to just be immersed and
And
to
that's
navigate
really
that way.
big of somebody to be able to notice that right away, or once they have enough depth inside of a conversation to say, you know what, I'm not the best subject matter expert for this, but I've built a relationship with somebody who is, or this is immediately who you need to speak with, because you
Yeah.
didn't brush that person off, but you also didn't lead them on to a path that you really couldn't answer what they were dealing with.
And, a lot of leaders, I'll tell you, it's Dave Nordel's opinion that we've probably missed two generations of deliberate development of leaders. We've built hyper managers, and we've missed this piece. But a lot of leaders feel that it's weakness to admit that they can't handle the issue that they're handing it. And I have never met a leader that can navigate all of it ever.
Because
So
there's a
tap in.
difference, right? Because there's a big difference between a process and people, right? And so, and I know I wanted to segue right into your consulting firm, which I
Yeah.
thought, in addition to obviously helping people who are veterans, which is absolutely wonderful cause, because I want every veteran to get as much assistance as they can for serving our country and going through the things that person, man, woman, has been going through. But you also discuss leadership styles, and you've done very successful in your consulting business. And I'd love to dive into that with you.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I did a solo podcast. I have the Kangaroo Leadership podcast, and I have people
Saw
like
that.
you
I
on.
saw that.
Yeah, and I have people like you on, and maybe I'll reciprocate. Maybe
I would
we'll
love
flip
to.
I'll flip. Oh, it'd be great. I'll flip the tables
Yeah.
on you. That's a lot of fun actually. But I just before we got on here, I recorded a 30-minute spot on courage
Right.
and organizational courage and taking the step forward. And I'll tell you, you use the word successful, and I guess most people would say success means your bank account's big, the money's rolling in.
Right.
Some people would say success is dropping 30 points in a basketball game, whatever that is, right? Because we gauge it off numbers, right?
Correct. It's
Right.
measurable. It's immediately
Yeah,
measurable.
it's win loss. It's win
Yeah.
loss, and then it's measurable.
Something so simple as losing weight, right? I went
Right.
from this weight to this weight, right?
Yeah,
And it's
right.
measurable.
Exactly. But is it about volume or is it about impact? So you can be highly successful in one area doing one thing with one person and have a bigger impact than trying to run across the things. So here's what I'll tell you is with these leadership, I just did a thing on courage because what I find is that when things are when you don't know, we've talked a little bit about this, when you don't know about something and you don't understand it, and that drives a little bit of fear and a little bit of pain, or a lot of fear and a lot of pain.
No question.
We as humans, our first reaction is to work to. Now, I'll use a German Shepherd as an example because I have a German Shepherd in my life. It's not my dog, but it might as well be, and she's with me an awful lot. If I'm walking her, there are certain people that will see me at 200 yards and go across the street because I have a German Shepherd.
Absolutely.
Because they think they have a perception of German Shepherds, right?
Yes, they do.
I have other people that will come up to me and say, I have this big fear of large dogs. Is she okay to pet? And which she is. So they get to work on that. That's a good thing. And then I have other people that, are overly aggressive and they want to, touch her too much. And that, that's a thing.
That's a very
But
bad idea.
but that's society, right? And so when you walk in and you say, here's the veteran experience, here's kind of what we need, here's some phenomenon, and I have a whole drill that I go through of perception on both ends, and then it really identifies the gap between what people think of veterans and where veterans are in their transition. And that drives emotion. What I'm finding, Rashad, which is probably the biggest leadership challenge, what I'm finding is that this veteran phenomenon drives more people to no than it does to yes. So it's an extra step. It's easier to sell if you can just get a couple people to chew it and tell somebody else that it tastes good. This is different. It's not a product. It's a culture.
Right.
It's a societal shift. It's a societal mindset. And we should never have any veterans committing suicide in any day. We should never have any homeless veterans. And when veterans come out, employers should have a full understanding of what some of their challenges are, but also all of the good stuff that we bring and how to leverage that.
So a question I have is,
Sure.
And this is just, I've known people in the military, but I've never served, and this is just a question I have openly. Obviously, the discipline that somebody would get in the military is a lot more significant, life and death, as opposed to everyday life of somebody not in it. When you're leading civilians, how do you cope with people who, I'm kind of trying to word this correctly, for lack of a better term, BS you when that wouldn't work in the military? Like, how does that, what's the expectation and the difference level with dealing with the civilian versus the military situation?
We tend to screw that up sometimes.
Okay. Really?
Because, yeah, and this is all about the adaptation. So to set the stage for the phenomenon isn't, when you're a veteran, you're like a hot dog, right? You take a hot dog, you put it in a microwave, right? You put the hot dog in the microwave, right?
It's a lot.
Once you hit the button, you've changed the DNA of the hot dog. I don't care if it looks the same. It's forever. It's forever changed.
100%.
When you raise your hand, go to basic training, and go through the indoctrination. When you're indoctrinated, listen to these words. When you're indoctrinated and then you're institutionalized, listen to these words, because these words sound almost like going to prison, don't they? Because there's
it sounds like right. It really does, Rick. Shawshank's in my mind.
And we do, yes. Well, that's it. Actually, if you've seen Shawshank Redemption, I use that as an example. Have you seen Shawshank Redemption? You see how, and they show you the different, everybody transitions differently. Everybody does it differently, right? To the point where some people commit suicide because they just can't do it. A lot of recidivism is because they've been institutionalized so long that they just go commit a crime so they can go back in because that's all they know.
Exactly.
So the phenomenon is the exact same. So now you come out and say you were leading 12, 15 guys, 50 guys in combat. And you did things like, today we're going to do blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's absolutely lined out, right? When somebody's not towing the line, you kind of get in their grill a little bit, tell them what the consequences are going to be. In some cases, they end up doing push-ups or whatever.
Right.
They look at your rank, you outrank them, and by law, they have to follow your orders unless there's some crazy thing, and they do it.
Right.
Try that with a bunch of civilians.
Yeah.
What if I walked into some area and I said front leaning rest position, which is push-ups. Give me 10. You know what they'd say? First of all, they'd laugh at me. Second of all, they'd ask if I was serious. If I did get really serious and say, yes, I'm serious, they would pick their stuff up off their desk, go to HR, and they wouldn't have a problem. I would have a problem. That's just the way it would be. Because that's not how you do it, right? So you can't yell con. You just can't. It's the whole different thing that you have to do. Everybody thinks that that's what veterans do. They just yell at people and bark orders and do that type of stuff. And that is so far from the truth because we are overdeveloped in leadership. We're overdeveloped. All this culture stuff that I've talked about, navigating just the nuances of different value sets and those type of things, navigating all of that. And that's why the services have values so that we can rally around one set of values. Doesn't matter where you came from, but we screw this up. And we go into organizations and we say things like, I've done that before. That's not too difficult. Here's the checklist. Let's move out. And people are like, who's this guy or who's this gal or what do they know? Are they trying to take my job? And then we overwork ourselves. Then we overwork ourselves. We look and we go, oh, well, I should probably stay late. So then you stay late. Well, in the military, that's like, good job. We got the mission done. We need to get it done. In the civilian world, it's like, you're showing off, or I'm not paying you overtime. Or if you're going to work extra hours, then hire another person because we don't want you to do those kind of things.
Correct.
On the flip side, when somebody says a meeting starts at noon and it's going to end at 1 o'clock, and everybody comes in late and the meeting goes till 1:30, well, then everybody's undisciplined savages and they should have some sort of paperwork or discipline action. Right. And it's just, that's the way they operate because they schedule things, all of it. So do you see where a veteran can get into it? 50% of veterans are gone out of their jobs in their first year.
Because of the structure and the differences and the cultural differences, right? Yeah.
It doesn't fit.
Right.
And we're made to be critical thinkers, think asymmetrically, solve problems, complete missions, take care of your battle buddy to the right, your battle buddy to the left. We want to ride for the brand. We got to have something on us, right? We want to be, and we cherish our values, and we want leaders that three-dimensionalize the value. So don't scream at everybody on the shop floor because they don't have steel-toed boots on when they're dressed like me in shorts and flip-flops. Doesn't work.
Right. And on the flip side of that, and this isn't dismissing anybody's profession. That coffee that didn't have cream in it for that customer isn't anywhere close to the life and death situation that you were dealing with on a day-by-day basis.
Our baseline reality. Hey, I have said out loud, probably inappropriately, only because as a medic, when you've been to a combat zone, I have said out loud more than once in situations that had people really stressed out. I've said out loud, I don't see anybody zipping body bags closed. This is not that big a deal.
Right.
To them, this is their body bag moment. To me, it's a nothing burger. So that really kind of makes me the ass.
Yeah. Talk about compartmentalizing right now. Right. Talk about compartmentalizing. Even when you say that right now, I'll never forget, I graduated from high school in 2001, and obviously 9/11 happened in 2001. And so some friends of mine joined the Army. And I remember when, I'm messaging him over like AOL Messenger, one of those messaging apps. And he's like, I'm like, hey, I don't want to, hey, my friend, I don't want to put his name out there if he doesn't want it. He's like, I'm in Baghdad. And you're like, you're doing one of these, here I am in my dorm room going to class, right, at 20. And he's like, yeah, I'm in Baghdad. Like, he put it in big, bold letters, too. And, like, everything that was going bad at that moment or in that week went away, like, immediately, right? Now, he's home safe, and, I've talked to him a couple times, never about that. I didn't want to get into that. But the point being is that will take you to a level of, it ain't that bad. It ain't anywhere close that bad, right? And kudos to him for what, he served honorably. But yeah, like what you just said made perfect sense, and that's exactly what I thought of immediately.
Let me give you some perspective, especially as Americans, and this is a non-military perspective. This is just a perspective of somebody that's led and probably made all the mistakes that a leader can make, and along the way have had some home runs. When COVID started around the globe, right, and we were spectators in the United States for a while, right? We
100%.
watched we watched it go through Asia. We really watched it really ravage and
Right,
those type
right,
of
right.
things. And we were ramping up. While people were out there fighting over water and
Mm,
protective gear,
mm.
we were fighting over toilet.
Yeah, right. 100%. 100%.
So when we think our situation is poor, you need to pull back off it. One of your first questions was 19 years old and then you go out into the world. When I was in Somalia in 93, so the Black Hawk downtime, think about my perspective on what's bad. And I saw things there in East Africa that you can't replicate in America because nobody's that low. You can go to the homeless of the homeless and they're not in as bad a shape as some of those people. And the happiest people that I've ever met in my life are the ones that are starving and happy. They got the biggest smiles on their face and they're the happiest. They're the most loving and they just appreciate everything for just what it is, just the ability to breathe. And we become this land of abundance and everything that we have, and we're miserable.
And so only somebody who's been other places and seen other people's conditions has, such a unique perspective on
Right.
something like that. The
Right.
internet doesn't do it justice.
And the lesson in there, Rashad, is go travel. The lesson is
Yeah,
in there isn't Dave's better than you because he's done stuff. The
right.
lesson in there is challenge yourself, have the courage
Yeah.
to say, yes, I can go here. And you know what? You don't need to go from Billings, Montana to Johannesburg, Africa.
Hmm.
You need to go from Billings, Montana to Providence, Rhode Island.
Right, right,
Just do that.
right.
And that'll change your perspective.
No question. And I know that this is a topic that, you have a lot of expertise in, but I did want to transition a bit about your
Sure.
books, because, you're an accomplished author as well, too, as well as a speaker. I saw a couple of the presentation, the questions you were asked about your book when you were at that
Sure.
library, and I thought that was
Yeah.
great. So can you give us a little bit of details about the books you wrote?
Yeah. Well, the first
Cows go to sleep,
The cow, yeah, when the cows lie
Yeah.
down. That's the first one was never intended to write a book. Had an English teacher that told me I should go in the military because I'd never make it in college.
Okay.
I won that bet, by the way. Got challenged to write a book because I'm a storyteller, and when I
Yeah.
speak, I storytell. So I took on a good challenge. But really, with the first book, what I wanted to do was just these things that we're talking about, just really dump it all into a book. So it's giving back life and leadership from the farm to the
Yeah.
combat zone and beyond. And it really is more about Dave's failures and trials and tribulations through life and my military time, and then some things to make you introspective. So maybe it'll help you out in a moment of need, because nothing is really novel. Everybody, you could give me your worst experience, and I would say you're not the first person.
Correct.
And so when we keep that perspective, we can work through things because somebody has traveled that path previously. When the cows lie down, which is that guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw
When
that
the
cover.
when the cows lie down, goes back to the farm, obviously, right? When you're on a farm, and scientists will say it's not scientifically proven, I'll say you better pay attention. When you're on the farm and all the cows are lying down, usually around some spindly little tree, there's probably a significant weather phenomenon that's coming.
Oh, geez.
And so if you pay attention to that, you might be able to put tractors inside, cover up hay, do those things
Yeah.
so that you don't have appreciable loss based on the weather phenomenon. And you should.
Right.
And I write about my experience up in Canada, the most recent time that had happened. I write about my experience with it. But it's really metaphorical for the cows in our life, the cows in our relationships, the cows in our family, the cows at work, all of these kind of things that we just walk by and we miss them. And then we have the weather phenomenon. We have some appreciable loss, figurative or literal. We have some appreciable loss.
Staring you in the face.
We do a root cause analysis on it, and somebody goes, man, if we would have noticed that, we wouldn't have had any of this. And those are the cows lying down. And
Yep.
that goes to mental health and how we interact with people.
Right.
And because the cows are subtle signs,
Right.
and they're everywhere around us, but we get going so doggone fast. And so the subtitle to that book is Why People Quit You, Their Leader. And a lot of times the cows lying down are your people, and they're giving you subtle signs, and you don't notice that until they've left you, or worse.
Well, the best perspective I can have on that is I've done martial arts, right? And so if you don't have I have a black belt in one style and I have a brown belt in another style, and I've taken multiple different styles of martial arts, and you can tell when somebody's ready to quit on the instructor. Like like all of a sudden they've lost their students and they may not know that was coming. You're like, you just don't. And I've been in various different schools. This isn't a shot at any instructor, but if you can't read the room of what's about to happen next, next thing you know, you'll see a class and you'll be like, dang, nobody's here. And then
you hear it most probably in the NFL, and you'll hear them
lay down on the coach.
And you'll hear them say the coach has lost the locker room.
Right. Yeah,
and usually the last person that knows the coach. Yeah. The last person knows coach. Yeah, the guy watching the game from 2,000 miles away knows the coach has lost the locker room, and he has no clue.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you're watching on TV, you have replay, right? You have you can see when they were like, yeah, that cornerback didn't exactly get, didn't give his 110% effort, and you'd be like, the coach can't even see that guy just laid down. Right. That's a great analysis. So, what about your motivational speaking? I know we're obviously, and I'm very cognizant of your time and schedule.
No, you're good.
Number one, where can we find David Nordel? And number two, what's the depth and breadth of your speaking that you do?
Hey, listen, I love doing motivational stuff. I love coming in and just kind of firing up the room. And I've got a few things I talk about, and I talk about MaxFab, which is that's the way to get a hold of me is www.maxfabconsulting.com. That's MAXFAB consulting.com. If you do that, everything's there. The blogs are there, the podcasts are there, the books are there. You can read more about me, but there's also a button to click and you can chit chat with me for up to 45 minutes if you want, doing this totally free. If you want to carry on a coaching relationship after that, that's great. If you want to have me come out and talk for an hour, that's great. If you think I'm a madman and I'm nuts, that's great too, because it's the world, man. And so, not everybody's going to love the flavor of Dave, but the speaking is really geared around, most of my speaking is really geared around driving interest. Right. I want people to think. I don't want to tell people things. When you're telling people things, they tend to shut down a little bit.
Of course they do.
But if and I'm a storyteller, and if you come to one of my talks, you're going to get a story. And the Max Fab story is all about organizational attitude, and the one thing that you control every day, no matter what, is your attitude. And if you have the right one with the right tempo, you can work through things. If you're a martial arts person, you know that. The best you've been at martial arts is when your attitude in the head has been in the right space. And the worst you've been is when you've been distracted.
Absolutely.
And especially if you're distracted and you're mad or upset at something, you feel like you've been wrong.
I'll tell you this too, is that and this relates to your leadership style, if you're in there and you're sparring and you aren't prepared against somebody who you are and aren't will be revealed very, very, very quickly.
Yeah.
There's no,
sometimes kids will call in fake bomb threats to school because there's a test. You know why?
They're not prepared.
They didn't study.
Exactly.
Nobody in life ever had anxiety. Nobody said, "Oh, I don't want to take this test." If you've studied your butt off, you want the test. You want it, and you want it. You can't. You're like, "Give me the test. I'm ready to go." 100%. Nobody. So when people wander around and they've got this lack of confidence, they got their heads down and those types of things, it's because you haven't done the work.
Desperate measures. They start pulling desperate measures and doing very, very dumb things.
Do the work.
So, no doubt. And I want to, make sure that I say this to every single guest. This is why I created the TRON podcast, was to talk to people like you, because I would never have had the privilege to be able to talk to somebody like you and get your time without doing something like this.
Yeah.
A 30-year Air Force veteran with a lot of life to give and wants to share it with others. All the people that I've talked to all want to share this with others. You guys aren't closed off people, right? Mm-hmm. You're not like, I'm just going to go ahead and have this little sand of time while I keep this all to myself. And,
I love that.
It's beautiful. You guys share it with people.
Right. Giving back is the title of the book, is because of that, the sharing thing. The second thing I'll tell you, Rashad, here's the deal. Stop saying thank you for your service and ask us our story.
Yeah. Can I just leave with that? It's so, and this is somebody who didn't serve. I always try to make sure that you have to be careful, I'm guessing, how to word it. Don't be, don't be a movie guy.
All you have to do is say, you served? And then somebody's going to go, yes. And they're going to stand up straight because we're proud of that. And you're going to go, what's your story? And then strap it on. Then get ready to get a story. And sometimes people will go, I've been in for 3 months and I just got out of basic training and my next, and you go, that's great, man. Good luck. And sometimes you run into a guy like me and I'll say, how long do you got? And what do you want to know? Yeah. And when people have the time, they'll go through it. I had a guy, I was going to play golf the other day, and there's the traditional guy that signs you in, takes your money, and gets you out the door. Great guy. I've known him for a while. And because of the political atmosphere with Ukraine and those kind of things, he said, Dave, he goes, what's your opinion on this? And he said out loud, he goes, I grew up here. He goes, this is all I know. He's an older guy. He's older than me, actually. He said, this is all I know. He says, I haven't been out in the world. He goes, you've kind of touched all the corners. He goes, what do you think? And I said, Jim, I'm going to answer your question, but you have to, first of all, you're going to have to keep a really open mind, and you're going to have to accept my answer because it's not going to be short. And I went through, my perspective on things, what drives my perspective on things.
Right.
And when I finished, I actually apologized to him. I said, that's a lot, man. That's a lot to digest. And he goes, no, I needed that.
Just to hear it.
And if people will listen to veterans, we will tell you. We're not going to give you the bloody. Some of us will go a little bit deeper than others. For my mental health, sometimes I share a little bit more than I know some would, but it's because that's how I tend to navigate that.
Right.
But the stuff that you're going to get, some of it's going to be absolutely hilarious, and some of it is going to just be really solid nuggets of teaching that you can't get anyplace else.
Get it. I'll tell you a really quick snippet is I'll never forget this. I was about 10 or 11 years old, and so I'm in Michigan, and I took the dog outside, somehow locked myself out of the house. Both my parents were home, my older brother. Like, it was just like one thing after the other, and I'm like, oh man, this sucks. And I just had like a t-shirt and shorts and a little sweatshirt on. So I went to my neighbor across the street, and I didn't know he had served in World War II. I lived across this guy my entire life, and parents knew him well. Open up the door, and I can't remember what branch of service he was in, but all his stuff, it was like you literally walked in a museum. And and I sat there till my parents got home, like 2.5 hours later. He's talking about how he was stationed in the Philippines, and you're just like, you're a kid. I'm like 11 years old, and I'm like, this is the most incredible story I've ever heard. He's like, I got in there when I was 20, and he's talking about the food he ate, the places he met, the people and I'm like, I never knew. And to your point, like, it was just like, you could have made a Spielberg movie out of this moment, right? Like, it was one of the greatest moments I ever had in my entire life.
Yeah, that's great. My 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Holmes, brought her husband to class to talk to us one time. Mm-hmm. And if you know about World War II history, early in the war, there was a big battle in the Coral Sea, a naval battle. And we lost an aircraft carrier, which was the USS Lexington. And he was on that. He was on that aircraft carrier, and he told us the whole story about the whole battle, the whole day. Yeah, and like I told you, something funny comes out of it. He had just gone through the galley to get lunch, and because under combat conditions they serve cold food, they handed him a tuna fish sandwich and an apple. And then the ship got hit, and it was so hilarious. He goes, I had this sandwich and this apple, and he thought, I might need this for later, right? So he put it in his shirt, went down the netting on the ship, and then went into the water. And he goes, having a tuna fish sandwich in the Coral Sea strapped to your chest is not good when there's a million sharks around.
Oh my God.
So I knew I made a bad decision.
In the midst of all that, he still remembered that humorous situation.
Yeah,
Well, in the absence of thank you for your service, I appreciate you telling your story and what you shared, from this guy who's just trying to, get inside of people's heads and learn some things on the TRON podcast. Mr. Dave Nordel, I cannot thank you enough. You've been a wonderful guest, and I would love to talk to you again soon. Anytime, brother.
Out here, man.
Bye.